The idea of moderation has long served as a comforting guideline in nutrition, reassuring, flexible, and seemingly rational. A little won't hurt, we tell ourselves, whether reaching for processed meats, sugary drinks, or ultra-processed snacks. But as scientific understanding of chronic disease deepens, the concept of moderation deserves a more critical look. What if even small, consistent exposures to certain foods accumulate in ways that meaningfully damage health over time? What if moderate intake, repeated daily or weekly across decades, still carries measurable risk? This isn't about fear-mongering, it's about arithmetic. Many of the most harmful substances in the modern diet, such as nitrites in processed meat, added sugars in beverages, or trans fats in certain baked goods, don't need to be consumed in large amounts to do harm. A single hot dog a day, a soda with lunch, or the habitual use of margarine containing trans fats may seem inconsequential in isolation. But the body doesn't reset every 24 hours. These exposures, even when small, are cumulative. They interact with our cells, hormones, gut bacteria, and blood vessels, gradually shifting the body's internal balance toward inflammation, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress. Chronic diseases, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, don't happen overnight. They are the product of years, even decades, of low-level damage. Epidemiological studies increasingly show that risk is not always linear, meaning that the first incremental exposure to a harmful compound may do more damage per gram than higher doses. For example, the cancer risk from processed meat rises significantly even with very low intake. Similarly, consuming just one sugar-sweetened beverage per day has been associated with a noticeable rise in the risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. These are not high-dose scenarios. They're examples of how the cultural norm of a little bit now and then can mask patterns that are, in fact, habitual. Moderation is also vulnerable to reinterpretation. What starts as an occasional treat can easily become a daily routine. When food is hyperpalatable, convenient, and heavily marketed, the threshold between moderation and overconsumption becomes blurry. And when nearly every meal contains some form of processed or inflammatory ingredient, moderation becomes more of an illusion than a guardrail. This doesn't mean that every indulgence must be eliminated or that dietary perfection is required. Rather, it calls for a shift in how we define small amounts. Instead of thinking in terms of daily or weekly frequency, we might do better to ask, how often does this ingredient enter my diet? Is it playing a central role or an incidental one? Could something equally enjoyable but less harmful take its place? When harmful foods are consumed truly occasionally and in the context of a protective, nutrient-rich diet, the body is remarkably resilient. But when those foods show up regularly, even in modest servings, the damage may quietly accumulate. The goal is not rigid avoidance, but informed choice. Moderation should be measured not just by quantity, but by impact. Some foods, like leafy greens, beans, or berries, have no known threshold where benefits plateau. Others, like trans fats or processed meats, show risk at even low levels of intake. It's time to align our definitions of moderation with what science now shows about long-term exposure and cumulative harm. Rethinking moderation isn't about removing joy from eating. It's about making space for lasting health by understanding how little things, repeated often, shape our future. In that sense, the question isn't whether a small amount is acceptable, but whether it's worth the long-term trade-off.